When your heart becomes tired of human advice, when every business plan collapses under the weight of uncertainty, and when numbers no longer bring peace to your soul, then you are finally ready for divine consultation. For there comes a moment when heaven whispers, "Let take over your boardroom." When God becomes your business consultant, the impossible begins to yield to the inevitable. Miracles stop being stories and start becoming strategies. You see, many build their enterprises on human logic, but the kingdom is built on revelation. God does not sit in your office to review your balance sheet. He sits upon the throne to rewrite your destiny. When you invite Him into your decisions, not as a visitor but as a partner, your business becomes a living altar of obedience. It ceases to be a mere company. It becomes a calling. When God is your consultant, you stop asking, "How much can I gain?" and begin to ask, "How much can I glorify?" For the secret of supernatural success lies not in calculation, but in consecration. The Holy Spirit becomes your strategist. He guides not with spreadsheets, but with stillness. He will teach you to see opportunity where others see risk, to sow when others save, and to rest when others rush. Emotional detachment is not indifference. It is trust in divine timing. When your heart no longer trembles, a market changes, or fluctuating sales, it is because your spirit is anchored in something unshakable. You become like a tree planted by living waters, unmoved by seasons, yet fruitful in all. Detachment is the language of faith. It says, "I am not controlled by outcomes. I am connected to the source." There is a realm where human striving ends and divine flow begins. That realm is entered not by effort, but by surrender. When you stop trying to impress people and start trying to please God, wisdom descends like rain. You begin to operate not from anxiety, but from assurance. Every idea becomes a seed of obedience. Every risk becomes an act of worship. God's consultation does not remove responsibility. It refines it. You still labor, but your labor is led by light. You still plan, but your plans are born in prayer. You still dream, but now your dreams are wrapped in divine instruction. In that sacred partnership, heaven's economy begins to override earth's limitations. Clients come not merely through marketing, but through divine magnetism. Resources align not through persuasion, but through providence. When you learn to let go of fear, when you detach from the desperation to succeed, miracles begin to breathe in your business. For God cannot fill what is already full. He fills the empty, the surrender, the listening. Let your meetings begin with worship. Let your goals be baptized in prayer. And let your ambitions die until only His purpose remains alive within you. Then, and only then, you will see that the greatest consultant is not the one who charges a fee, but the one who already paid the price. When He guides you, you will never walk in confusion. When He leads you, even failure becomes formation. And when He breathes upon your plans, your work becomes worship and your profits become praise. When we speak of divine partnership, we are not referring to a poetic metaphor or a religious slogan. It is the sacred reality of allowing God to enter into the deepest structure of your labor, your plans, and your vision. When you invite God to be your business consultant, you are not simply seeking inspiration, you are surrendering ownership. Most people want God to bless their plans, but few dare to ask God to build the plans Himself. Yet that is the true meaning of divine partnership. It is the recognition that all wisdom, all provision, and all direction flow from a source higher than human intellect. In every sphere of work, there is a natural limit to what the human mind can calculate. You may have talent, experience, and education, but human capacity is finite. There are seasons in life where your strategies stop producing results, your confidence begins to fade, and your clarity disappears in the fog of uncertainty. It is in that holy frustration that God often waits. He does not step into your affairs until you reach the end of yourself. Divine partnership begins where self-sufficiency ends. When you come before God and say, Lord, this business is not mine, it's yours. These hands are yours. These ideas are yours. You are transferring ownership from earth to heaven. You are declaring that you no longer run your enterprise as an independent entity, but as an extension of divine purpose. And once that transfer takes place, heaven begins to release resources that cannot be measured in currency. You receive not only provision, but divine direction. Not just ideas, but revelation. You stop reacting to circumstances and start responding to divine instruction. This partnership transforms the way you make decisions. Instead of being led by fear, trends, or competition, you are led by peace. The world teaches you to chase opportunity. The Spirit teaches you to discern it. There is a vast difference between the two. Opportunities that are not aligned with God's purpose will exhaust you, no matter how profitable they appear. But divine opportunities come wrapped in peace. You can sense their timing, their alignment, and their confirmation through prayer. When you begin to make decisions under divine partnership, the burden of success shifts. You no longer carry the weight of outcomes because you understand that obedience is your part and results are God's. Divine partnership also demands humility. Many want God to bless their business, but they refuse to let Him correct it. God cannot partner with pride. He only walks with those who are willing to listen, to be corrected, and to change course when instructed. When you allow God to be your consultant, He may dismantle the very systems you have trusted for years. He may ask you to close one door so that a greater one can open. He may strip away what you think is security to teach you to depend on His unseen provision. In those moments, divine partnership feels uncomfortable, even risky. But every divine instruction carries the seed of supernatural increase. Partnership with God turns prayer into a business tool. Prayer is no longer a religious duty. It becomes your boardroom meeting with heaven. You come not to perform, but to listen. Many pray for miracles while holding on to control. But true partnership means bringing every major decision into the presence of God and waiting for His peace to lead. That peace becomes your approval stamp. When your spirit is unsettled, you know the timing is wrong. When your spirit is still, you know heaven has signed the plan. Divine partnership changes your definition of success. You stop measuring greatness by revenue or recognition. Success becomes alignment, being exactly where God wants you to be, doing exactly what He wants you to do. Sometimes that alignment leads to multiplication. Sometimes it leads to pruning. But both are blessings when they come from Him. You begin to see that profit without peace is poverty, and loss with God's favor is preparation. In divine partnership, the ordinary becomes sacred. Your workplace becomes your altar. Every meeting becomes an opportunity for God to display His wisdom through you. You learn to depend not on persuasive words, but on divine favor that draws the right people at the right time. You begin to sense divine orchestration in the smallest details, emails arriving at the perfect moment, closed doors protecting you from unseen harm, unexpected opportunities, revealing divine fingerprints all over your path. When God becomes your business consultant, your goals are purified, your motives are refined, and your perspective is enlarged. You realize that your business is not just a platform for income, but a channel for influence, generosity, and kingdom impact. You begin to see clients not as customers, but as souls, transactions not as numbers, but as seeds, and profits not as ends, but as instruments for God's purposes. The more you trust Him, the more He entrusts you. The more you release control, the more He releases provision. And in that sacred exchange between heaven and earth, your business becomes something holy, a vessel through which miracles happen daily, not because of human strategy, but because of divine partnership. There is a vast difference between human strategy and divine revelation. Strategy is built through observation, but revelation is born through communion. When you rely on strategy alone, your decisions are limited by what you can see, measure, and predict. But when you walk in revelation, you are guided by what heaven has already seen, already prepared, and already declared. The greatest entrepreneurs of faith are not those who mastered the market, but those who mastered surrender. They learned to listen before they planned, to wait before they acted, and to build not from ambition, but from divine instruction. Every great move of God begins with a vision that cannot be explained by human logic. It comes as a whisper, an impression, or a divine idea that seems too large for your resources and too impossible for your understanding. Yet that is how God operates. He plants revelation in fragile hearts to prove that success is not born from human brilliance, but from divine partnership. The spiritual blueprint always precedes the physical structure. What is unseen shapes what becomes seen. If you try to build without revelation, your success will always be limited to human endurance. But when your plans are birthed in the Spirit, even small beginnings carry eternal weight. When God gives revelation, He is not offering suggestions. He is releasing strategy from heaven's mind. His revelation carries the blueprint for timing, provision, and purpose. That is why it is dangerous to imitate others. What works for one person may fail for another, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't revealed to you. Revelation is personal. It is the signature of God on your assignment. Human wisdom can teach you principles, but only revelation gives you divine direction. You can read books, attend seminars, and study trends, but revelation comes when you kneel before God and say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." When you receive revelation, it brings light into your confusion. You no longer move by guessing, you move by knowing. The Holy Spirit becomes your internal compass, pointing you toward opportunities aligned with purpose. You will find that revelation simplifies life. It removes the noise of endless opinions and silences the anxiety of uncertainty. God does not need to explain every detail. One word from Him can replace 1,000 hours of planning. That one divine idea, that one moment of illumination can change the course of your business, your ministry, your entire destiny. But revelation demands obedience. The moment God reveals something to you, you become responsible for acting upon it. Many receive insight, but fail to implement it, and so they never see the fruit of what God spoke. Revelation without obedience becomes frustration. The true test of faith is not how well you hear God, but how quickly you obey Him. When He gives you a divine blueprint, it may not make sense to the natural mind. He may tell you to launch when resources are low, to wait when everything looks ready, or to invest in something unseen. But revelation always carries hidden wisdom. What seems illogical is often the very path to the miraculous. When you live by revelation, fear begins to lose its power. You are no longer bound by the visible. You begin to understand that heaven's timing is perfect and that divine ideas come with divine backing. You stop comparing your progress to others because you realize you are building something different, something designed by the Spirit. Revelation gives you confidence that even in delay, God is working. It teaches you that progress is not measured by activity, but by alignment. You can rest knowing that what God reveals, He also sustains. In the world of business and leadership, people are constantly searching for strategies that guarantee success. But strategies age, markets shift, and systems collapse. Revelation never expires. It remains as powerful in crisis as in prosperity. When you build from revelation, you build something that cannot be shaken. The storms may come, but the structure stands because it was not founded on cleverness, but on the voice of God. The spiritual blueprint will always outlast human strategy, for what comes from heaven carries the eternal seal of purpose that no circumstance can erase. Emotional detachment is one of the highest forms of faith, and yet it is the most misunderstood. Many think detachment means indifference, that you stop caring about results or outcomes. But true spiritual detachment is not about apathy, it is about trust. It is the deep inner knowing that the outcome is already secure in God's hands, and therefore your peace does not depend on how things appear. When you reach that place of stillness within, you no longer chase after what you have already surrendered. You operate from a quiet confidence, not from desperation. Detachment is the fruit of intimacy with God. It is what happens when your heart learns to rest in divine timing rather than human urgency. Most people live in emotional bondage to outcomes. Their joy rises and falls with sales, approval, or progress. Their peace depends on results, and their self-worth is tied to achievement. But that kind of living is exhausting because it makes you a slave to circumstances. God never designed your emotions to be driven by outcomes. He designed them to be anchored in His presence. When you walk with God as your consultant, He will teach you that success is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of stability. Detachment is the inner freedom to remain calm when things go right and unshaken when they don't. It is the maturity to say, I trust God whether I see the profit or not, because I know He is faithful beyond the numbers. This kind of faith is what separates those who build temporarily from those who build eternally. When you are emotionally attached to outcomes, you tend to force timing, manipulate circumstances, and compromise peace. You start making decisions out of fear of losing, fear of missing out, fear of failure. But when you are detached, you make decisions out of clarity. You act because you are led, not because you are pressured. Detachment is what allows you to hear God clearly in the noise of uncertainty. It is in that stillness that divine wisdom begins to flow. There will be seasons when everything seems to pause, when the business slows down, or when doors you expected to open suddenly close. In those moments, emotional detachment is tested. That is when you must remember that silence is not absence and delay is not denial. God often hides His greatest work behind seasons of stillness. When you are detached, you do not panic, you pray. You do not rush, you rest. You do not strive to fix what only God can unfold. Detachment is not a withdrawal from effort. It is a release of anxiety. It means you continue to work diligently while keeping your heart at peace. This principle of detachment is deeply connected to identity. When you no longer define yourself by your performance, you stop fearing loss. You can face rejection without resentment and setbacks without self-pity. You understand that your worth was settled long before your success was visible. This freedom allows you to take bold steps without being paralyzed by the possibility of failure. You learn to view both victory and loss as teachers, both blessing and hardship as instruments of growth. God can only trust the detached heart because it is the one that will not worship outcomes above obedience. When you reach this level of maturity, you become a vessel that heaven can trust with abundance. God can bless you without those blessings controlling you. You can receive wealth and remain humble, gain influence and remain gentle, face adversity and remain thankful. Detachment turns you into a steward rather than an owner. You understand that everything you have belongs to Him, and therefore nothing can truly be taken from you. The detached soul does not cling to what it builds, because it knows who the true builder is. When you walk in this kind of faith, miracles follow you naturally. The pressure lifts, anxiety dissolves, and divine flow begins. You start to experience what it means to operate from rest. Opportunities begin to appear effortlessly because your spirit is aligned, not striving. You no longer fear what's ahead because you have already surrendered what's behind. Detachment is not weakness, it is divine confidence. It is the quiet strength of a soul that has learned to say, God, even if I lose everything, I still have everything because I have you. There is a kind of power that is born only in silence. A strength does not shout, but shapes destinies. When your heart becomes still before God, you begin to perceive His direction with clarity that human intellect cannot achieve. Inner stillness is not inactivity, it is alignment. It is the posture of a soul that has stopped wrestling with its own understanding and started resting in divine wisdom. Many people are busy, but few are guided. They fill their days with movement, but lack direction because their inner world is loud. When your heart is noisy with anxiety, fear, and overthinking, the voice of God becomes faint. But when you quiet your spirit, even a whisper from heaven becomes thunder in your soul. Stillness is not the absence of work. It is the foundation of effective work. It is the place where divine strategies are revealed and where the human mind synchronizes with divine order. When you are still before God, you begin to see that every situation has timing. Every delay has design, and every closed door has protection behind it. The restless heart interprets delay as denial, but the still heart recognizes it as direction. Stillness teaches you that you don't have to chase what God has already appointed for you. It frees you from striving so that you can move from pressure to peace, from confusion to clarity. In the stillness of prayer, God begins to reorder your thoughts. He untangles your emotions and restores your focus. You begin to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between what is good and what is God. It is in these quiet moments that vision becomes sharper and burdens become lighter. The world often glorifies activity as progress, but in God's kingdom, stillness often precedes acceleration. Before great breakthroughs, God brings His people into silence, not to punish them, but to prepare them. It is in the hidden stillness that He strengthens your faith, renews your mind, and builds endurance for what is coming next. When you live from inner stillness, external chaos cannot shake you. You may face storms, but the storm no longer enters you. The peace of God becomes your anchor. You begin to walk through challenges with composure, not because they are easy, but because you have found the unshakable calm that comes from trust. Inner stillness turns prayer into partnership. It is where you stop talking and start listening. And in that listening, heaven speaks solutions that the world could never teach. God's direction rarely comes in noise. He leads His people through whispers, impressions, and gentle nudges of the Spirit. The still heart catches what the restless mind misses. That is why stillness is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the discipline of confidence, the posture of faith that says, I do not need to see the whole path to know that God is guiding my steps. From that sacred place of peace, breakthroughs are born, not through striving, but through surrender. When your pursuit shifts from prosperity to purpose, everything in your life begins to realign. Purpose gives meaning to your success. It gives direction to your energy and sanctifies your ambition. Prosperity without purpose is empty, but purpose inevitably attracts prosperity because God always funds what He authors. When you make purpose your priority, you begin to view success differently, not as the accumulation of things, but as the fulfillment of divine assignment. The question changes from, what can I gain, to what can I give? From that moment, heaven begins to trust you with more, because your heart is no longer owned by what you possess. Many people chase prosperity as if it were the ultimate proof of God's favor, but prosperity is only the byproduct of alignment. It is the natural result of walking in obedience. When you live for purpose, your work becomes sacred. Every task becomes an offering. You stop separating business from spirituality because you understand that your enterprise is a platform for divine impact. Purpose turns ordinary effort into worship. It transforms your company, your career, your creativity into a ministry that serves God by serving people. Purpose-driven living produces stability. When you operate from purpose, setbacks no longer discourage you, they refine you. Losses become lessons, and delays become direction. Purpose gives you the endurance to stand firm when others give up, because you know you are not driven by profit, but by calling. Prosperity is temporary. It fluctuates with seasons, but purpose is eternal. It keeps you grounded when success grows and peaceful when things seem uncertain. The one who lives for purpose does not need to compete because they understand that destiny is not a race but a revelation. When God becomes the center of your purpose, your vision expands beyond personal comfort. You begin to dream not just for yourself, but for others. Your business becomes a channel through which hope flows, families are blessed, and lives are transformed. That is when miracles begin to happen, not because you demanded them, but because your mission aligned with heaven's heartbeat. Prosperity follows purpose, like a shadow follows light. When you walk in purpose, you don't have to chase blessing. Blessing finds you. In that sacred harmony between divine calling and human effort, you discover the true wealth of life, to be used by God for something greater than yourself. When you allow God to be the architect of your vision, the consultant of your business, and the anchor of your heart, you step into a realm where human limits no longer define you. The striving ceases, the fear dissolves, and purpose begins to lead the way. Success becomes sacred, work becomes worship, and every decision becomes a dialogue with heaven. This is where miracles are no longer rare events. They become your new rhythm, the natural outcome of walking in divine partnership. So surrender your plans, silence your fears, and let God's wisdom write your future. For when He leads, you will never lack direction. And when He blesses, no power on earth can stop it.